Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is a quick first looks review of the Canon EOS R100, a compact entry-level mirrorless camera aimed at anyone wanting a step up in control and quality over their phone. Announced in May 2023 and costing around £670 in a kit with the RFS 18-45 zoom, the R100 arrives only 3 months after the R50, which until that point was the most affordable and simplest model in the EOS R series to date. Now the R100 comes in at an even lower price with an even simpler feature set, making it the new entry-level model in the range, and as such do expect some compromises. I spent some time with a pre-production model, and in this video I'll show you what's new and how the features compare to the next models up in the range. Measuring 116 by 86 by 69mm, the R100 on the left is essentially the same size as the R50 on the right, and while it is technically a tad lighter at 356 grams including battery, you're unlikely to notice the few grams of difference between them. Bottom line, both are compact lightweight bodies which you'll rarely find a burden to carry around, but equally both include decent sized and comfortably textured grips and are a lot more enjoyable to take pictures with than using a phone. On the upper right side of the R100 are the main mode dial with a power collar, a red movie record button, finger dial and the shutter release. Round the back there's a 4-way clicky rocker control for navigating menus, positioning the AF area or providing direct access to the ISO, drive, exposure compensation and flash options. As you'd expect for an entry-level model, there's no dedicated AF on button or AF joystick, and in the absence of a rear thumb wheel, the finger dial on the top becomes the primary means of adjusting exposure settings. Let's say you're in full manual mode for example. In this case the finger dial will operate the shutter speed by default, but push up on the rocker button and the control will switch to adjusting the lens aperture. You can see the function change by that little dial icon next to the value. So pushing this button once more will switch the control to the exposure compensation, although this is directly accessible with a single button in the other modes. Meanwhile, in full manual, a third press up cycles the control back to the shutter speed. Moving on to composition, the R100's electronic viewfinder employs an OLED panel with 2.36 million dots, 0.95 times magnification and a 60 frames per second refresh, so the same spec as the R50, albeit lacking its smoother 120 frames per second option, at least as far as I can tell. The rear surface is dominated by the screen, a 3-inch panel with 1.04 million dots, making it lower resolution than the R50 and the other higher end models in the series. But more importantly, the R100 screen is fixed in place, so unlike the R50 or the other higher end models, you're not able to flip it out to face you or for composing more comfortably at high or low angles. The screen isn't touch sensitive either, which to me personally feels like cost cutting taken a bit too far, given that the target audience are used to tapping, pinching and swiping their way through pretty much any user interface, especially on their phones. It also means there's no way to reposition the AF area by touch, which is a bit of a shame. But it's not the first time Canon's downgraded the screen on an entry-level model. The earlier EOS 2000D or Rebel T7 DSLR also sported a fixed non-touch screen and a slightly lower resolution one at that. In fact, while the R100 is arguably the mirrorless version of that DSLR, it is better featured overall. For instance, while the R100 lacks the multi-function shoe of higher end models in the series, it does at least sport a fully functioning hot shoe with a central synchronization pin, which means it should work with low-cost third-party flashes. In contrast, the 2000D or T7 lacked that crucial central pin, and the R50 doesn't even have any legacy pins at all, limiting both models to only using official Canon accessories, so a surprise benefit to the R100 there. Behind a flap on the grip side, a USB-C and micro HDMI ports, while on the left-hand side are a microphone input and a jack for an optional wide remote control, both nice to find despite the entry-level position for this body. The single SD card slot and battery are housed within a compartment beneath the body. The R100 is unsurprisingly powered by the same LPE17 battery as the R50 and R10, and like those models you can charge it in camera with a USB-C power delivery source. The R100 also features Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which, coupled with Canon's Camera Connect app, provide as seamless an experience as I've used for wirelessly connecting your phone and transferring images across. Like all EOS R cameras, the R100 sports an RF lens mount, which can take any of Canon's RF or RFS lenses, and thanks to the APS-C cropped sensor behind them, the field of view of all lenses is reduced by 1.6 times. Right now there's few if any third-party lenses in the native RF mount with autofocus, but you can adapt to older EF DSLR lenses from Canon or indeed any other brand. Canon has said it will consider licensing third-party lenses on a case-by-case basis, which doesn't sound to me like you're going to suddenly find the entire Sigma and Tamron mirrorless range in the RF mount anytime soon, and that's a shame. I understand Canon's desire to quality control the EOS R experience, not to mention protecting its investment, but I personally feel a key selling point of owning a budget EOS camera in the past was the wealth of affordable lenses available, a huge number of which came from third parties. Eliminate or reduce this access and you have a less attractive system overall in my view, especially at the price conscious entry level. Anyway, the R100 kit includes the RFS 18-45 f4.5 to 6.3 IS STM zoom, which delivers a range equivalent to 29-72mm. It's okay for starters and provides a compact walk-around option which retracts when not in use to become even smaller. If you're a handheld vlogger though, you'll need to adapt an old lens or wait for Canon to release something wider in the RF mount. And if you're after a blurrier background on a budget, I'd recommend adapting the old EF 50mm f1.8 STM lens. For imaging, the R100 employs a 24 megapixel APS-C sized crop sensor, which again reduces the field of view of all lenses by 1.6 times. Like the R50 and R10, there's no built-in stabilization, or IBIS for short. For IBIS in Canon's range, you're going to be spending a lot more on the R7 or the R6 upwards. This means to iron out any wobbles on photos, you'll want a lens with optical image stabilization, or IS for short. Like the kit zoom, although if you're filming video, you can also apply digital stabilization, albeit at the cost of a crop. That's why you need a wider lens. The R100 sensor may share the same size and resolution as that in the R50 and R10, but it's not the same component. Instead, I believe it's the older sensor from the EOS M50 and M52, which means there's some video restrictions to be aware of. But first, the photo settings, starting with the modes. The R100 of course offers the traditional manual, aperture priority, shutter priority and program modes, giving you direct control over the exposure settings, and you've already seen how that works in manual. If you prefer an easier life though, Scene Intelligent Auto does a good job at recognizing the subject and adjusting the settings to match, while Hybrid Auto additionally records short video clips which are then compiled into the day's highlights. For a little more creative control, the Special Scene mode lets you set the camera into portrait, landscape or say action modes, along with a silent option which exploits the electronic shutter to avoid any noise. Meanwhile, the Creative Filters mode allows you to apply a variety of effects from grainy black and white and toy camera to a selection of HDR options. For more options still, enter the main menu system where you can set the image quality, including a variety of JPEG sizes, along with RAW files and compressed RAW formats if you like, and 4 different aspect ratios. The sensor and image processor may not be the latest combination from Canon, but still support dual pixel CMOS AF with 88% coverage across the frame and the choice of single, spot, zone or full face and eye detection, albeit for humans only as far as I know. Focusing can be quick, quiet and accurate depending on the lens in use. If a lens doesn't have a manual focusing switch and you do want to adjust it manually, you will need to select manual focus from a menu. The R100 isn't designed as an action camera, but Servo AF will track subjects with a top burst speed of 3.5 frames per second, or 6.5 if you're happy without continuous autofocus. Moving on to video, the R100 essentially inherits the capabilities of the M50 before it, so it will film 1080 up to 50 or 60p without a crop and with the confident refocusing of dual pixel AF. So far so good, but the 4K mode, like the M50 before it, incurs a significant 1.55 times crop and is also limited to a less responsive contrast-based AF system. So unless your subject is static and you don't need wide coverage, I'd say it's best to think of the R100 as being a 1080 camera only. In high frame rate mode, you can film slow motion up to 120p, but in 720 resolution only, again like the older M50. There's also manual or auto audio levels and the option to apply digital stabilization, albeit again at the cost of a crop. In conclusion, the EOS R100 becomes the most affordable body in the EOS R system to date, delivering good-looking 24 megapixel photos and 1080 video from a compact body that's easy to use and provides access to the company's latest RF lenses. As the entry-level model in the range, there's inevitably some limitations, including a fixed screen with no touch capabilities, slow burst speeds, no IBIS, compromised 4K video, and fairly basic controls. But then it's no different to the previous entry-level DSLR, the 2000D or Rebel T7 in these regards, and it does sport a number of benefits over that model, including better autofocus, albeit a higher price tag. The various limitations are also resolved by stepping up to other models in the series. The EOS R50 adds a touch-sensitive flip screen, better subject detection, faster bursts, 4K video with decent AF, and Canon's latest multifunction shoe, albeit without the pins for simpler flashes. Spend a bit more on the EOS R10 and you'll gain more controls and longer bursts, while the flagship R7 boosts the photo resolution, adds dual card slots, a bigger battery, IBIS, and even more controls still. Now there's other features to weigh up, I've not covered them all here, not to mention full frame options to consider too as you increase your budget, but you get the idea how the range works. At the lower end of the series, I personally feel that the EOS R50 hits the sweet spot, with a lot more features than the R100 for not too much more money, while still being smaller and a bit cheaper than the R10. But if you don't need the RF lens mount, look out for bargains on an M50 Mark II, not to mention bagging yourself some EFM lenses while you're at it. And if your budget is tied to still, it's hard to beat an entry-level DSLR such as the 2000D or T7, or indeed the more capable 250D or SL3. Side note, thank God that Canon is now using the same product names across different regions. Ultimately, as the most basic model in the series today, the R100 is unlikely to get many enthusiasts overly excited, but it still does what it sets out to do, providing a lower point of entry to the EOS R system, and a step up in quality, control, and crucially handling over shooting with a smartphone. Just before going though, do remember that there's still very limited third-party lenses available for the EOS R system, and while you can adapt to older EF DSLR lenses from any brand, I do hope that Canon allows the full mirrorless lineup from Sigma, Tamron and others sooner rather than later. It'd really help the system at every point. Right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.